Hello, and welcome to the Joy of Cooking podcast. Each week, we set the table for a discussion about recipes and stories from the authors of The Joy of Cooking, kitchen victories and misadventures, and most importantly, what we are cooking and eating right now. We're glad you joined us at the table today. I'm Shannon Larson, home cook, ardent Joy of Cooking user and fan, and potato enthusiast.
I'm Megan Scott, co-author of the 2019 Joy of Cooking. I'm a food editor by day and avoider of dish duty by night, and I make a mean pot of vegan chili.
I'm John Becker, fourth-generation co-author and steward of The Joy of Cooking, America's oldest family-run cookbook. I'm technically an Aries, but someone told me that signs shifted and that I'm actually a Pisces, which makes more sense, but sometimes I cramp up when I swim, and that just doesn't happen to fishes as far as I know.
You so thought about that one. I'm impressed.
I did not think about it for very long.
Really?
So good.
I love it. I didn't know the signs changed. Interesting.
I didn't either. I also don't know what any of the signs are supposed to mean except for my own.
That could be total BS. I'm really not sure. I was just told that, and it made sense. It's like what I wanted to hear because I just don't. I'm not a Rammy.
You don't feel like an Aries.
I don't butt heads.
No, you
yeah,
don't.
no, that's true.
Yeah.
Much more fish-like. It's been kind of a blah week at our house. Like, I just haven't felt like, I don't think either of us have felt like cooking. We have cooked this week, but more just out of necessity than anything.
Yeah, necessity. I do some recipe testing work on the side not for Joy of Cooking, and I signed up for a White Russian recipe test, which, it's, they pay for my groceries, and so it was quite, it's
a good deal.
Considering how much effort it was involved and how simple that recipe is, it's like, all right, this is good. I also made some sausage balls, which I guess is it's a southern holiday treat.
Yeah, I definitely grew up at most holiday gatherings. You would have a plate of sausage balls.
Which typically, I guess it's Bisquick,
mm-hmm.
Bisquick and
sausage,
sausage.
And sometimes people put cheese, cheddar, in it.
I tried those the other night. Your sausage balls, they were good.
They were really a little dry.
Yeah, they're a little dry, but they're
like by design.
Yeah, they're always kind of a little bit.
Yeah, and then you have the mustard or whatever that you put it in,
dipping sauce of some kind.
Helps.
Yeah, but you don't. It's a party finger food, so you don't want it to be super. It's kind of needs to be a little bit dry.
Yeah, you don't
so
want
it's
greasy.
not messy. Yeah.
Also made bacalaitos, Puerto Rican salt cod fritters, which were really good.
Yeah, I never had.
It was a first for me.
I've had the salt cod fritters that are more, I guess, Spanish style, where they're round, like croquettes.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never had those where they're the ones you made anyway were like flattened.
Yeah, no, it was a very
really crispy,
thin pancake batter with big chunks of salt cod. You have to soften the salt cod, get some of that salt out of the fish. So it was like, you have to simmer it for 15 minutes and then actually change the water out, bring it up to a boil one more time. And that was enough to have a reasonable amount of salt in there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there was some sazon and sofrito and really good.
You serve it with
I actually just saw, I'm trying to remember which.
Street Disco.
Oh, right. Yeah, the restaurant Street Disco in Portland, Oregon. They were making, I guess they're having a pop-up of some kind, and they were making sandwiches out of them.
Oh.
Yeah. No, it sounds
actually
great.
sounds really good.
Yeah, I think they were putting some kind of slaw in there as well. But yeah.
I think it would be good with just a little bit of lime juice drizzled on.
Yeah, for sure.
Everything's better with lime juice.
Yeah.
Yeah, fried foods can always use like a little twinge of acid.
Yeah.
Oh, we did also get a really pretty cabbage in our CSA, which I feel like you're like, cabbage, what? Who cares? It's beautiful. It's like dark green and purple, but very, very purple. So pretty. I kind of don't want to eat it. I just want to look at it. But do you know what? Shannon's in the same CSA that we are. Do you know what you're going to do with your cabbage?
No, I've also not decided yet because it's so pretty that I feel like it has to be kind of the star of the night.
Yeah.
I love cabbage. I really think cabbage is an unsung hero. I haven't used it yet either. I do every time I open the crisper drawer because it's down in that right now. And I just look at her. She's just
it's like a flower.
stunning. Yeah.
Beautiful. I think I'm going to make, at least with half of it, I'm going to make melting cabbage.
Oh.
So like you cut it into wedges and then sear it in a pan. And then you create kind of like a braising liquid, maybe like put some miso in there, some chicken broth.
Well, that sounds really
and then
good.
you bake it until it's just like falling apart.
See, that's what I like to do with cabbage too. Like it's best when it's just like that. When it really is meant to kind of shine and it's not covered up by other things.
Yeah.
Yeah, this week at our house we did a lot of comfort food. I did like a red curry soup with ground chicken and rice noodles, and that was really comforting. I made it too spicy for my husband though. I like spicy food.
Sometimes you just have to feel something. You know?
I mean, I had to feel something. He ate it for dinner, but he's like, I don't know if I can do it for leftovers. So now it's just frozen and waiting for me to eat it whenever I feel like I need it. And then last night, talking about our CSA, we did CSA dinner night where everything we made was from our CSA, including like the garlic. I guess not the olive oil or the salt and pepper, but we did a roast chicken from the CSA and roasted carrots with honey from our from Oso, which is our favorite honey brand up here. It's so good. Roasted potatoes and then a beautiful chicory and celery leaf salad. That was really great, and it just felt cozy. And we watched the new Martha Stewart documentary.
Oh heck yeah! I haven't watched it yet.
It was a very romantic night at the Larsingtons. It was really good though. I mean, the chickens from Flying Coyote are absolutely insanely good. So.
And you sent me a picture of it, and your roast chicken looked really good.
Oh yeah, I do send pictures of my food to them pretty often so that they know I'm trying.
You know you're trying.
So you roasted the chicken in a cast iron pan?
Yeah, we do it in the cast iron, and then when the chicken was ready and it was sitting out, I finished the potatoes in the schmaltz for a little while and broiled them so they were still crispy, but then covered in chicken loveliness. So that was a big hit.
That's the way.
Yeah,
It's a good use of your time, like while the chicken rests.
yeah. I was like, why not do this? And then we used a bunch of fresh thyme from the CSA too, so everything was very like timey. I loved it.
I love it. So every week on the show, we taste something and talk about it. And we try to make it related to the topic of the show, which this week is vegan, kid-friendly recipes. And so this week I brought something I made, which is this like date peanut butter chocolate bark. It is not a recipe in Joy of Cooking, but it's something I saw on Instagram. And basically you take medjool dates, so like really moist, sticky dates, remove the pit, and then flatten them on a piece of parchment paper, and then put another piece of parchment on top, and you take a rolling pin and roll them out so they're like very flat. Then spread peanut butter or whatever, almond butter, whatever kind of nut butter on there, and then melted chocolate on top and flaky salt and put it in the freezer. It's so good. And it's so easy too. And I don't know, I feel this feels it's vegan. It feels kid friendly to me. At least I would have liked it as a kid.
Yeah.
Although I have to say on Halloween, we had our bucket full of candy, and the one thing that was left that some kids took, but like most kids didn't take, were Reese's peanut butter cups.
Really?
I was kind of shocked.
That is shocking.
Yeah.
To me.
Well, yeah. What was it? The sour gummy worms?
The sour gummy
definitely,
worms
like, the
went
favorite.
fast.
Well, those are delicious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The tide has shifted. I don't know. But this is really good. So let's try it.
It looks really perfect to put like a little chunk of it in a school lunch too, as like a little side, like a little dessert side that kids can take, which is always a plus.
Just hide it under the vegetables.
Yeah.
Well, it has dates in it, right?
Yeah,
It's
got
totally
dates.
healthy.
Sure. Nature's sugar.
I also think dates are really, really good. Sometimes I'll just have one as a little dessert if I'm not. I'm not a huge dessert person in general, but sometimes I just want something like kind of sweet after dinner, and that's a good one. Or like a fig or something, dried fig.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of dates. Just remember going down to Palm Springs, having date shakes for the first time. So good.
So good. It's kind of just an extra sweet milkshake. Like, it's not a strong flavor, but they're delicious.
Yeah,
especially when it's like 100 degrees.
Yeah, just have like a little bit of a fruity caramel hit to it. And yeah, it's really good.
Each week, we choose a topic to tackle based on caller suggestions. And this week, we're going to talk about kid-friendly vegan food. Can you play the hotline clip, please?
Hey, my name is Carly, and I'm leaving a message for the Joy of Cooking podcast. And I was wondering if you had any favorite vegan recipes, bonus points for any that are kid-friendly. And yeah, that's my question. Look forward to hearing.
So what does kid-friendly mean to you guys?
That's a good question. I don't have children myself.
Right. So empirically, it's hard for us to...
Yeah, it's a little bit more challenging. And I think that it's so dependent on the kid, because I know a lot of kids who are not maybe the most adventurous eaters, but then I know a lot of kids who are adventurous eaters.
Yeah.
So it's a mixed bag for me. I know for us, we kind of tend to go... We have school lunch dinner every so often in my house where we're like, we don't feel like thinking of something super interesting or grand. And we will literally cook up a box of Annie's macaroni and cheese, peas or broccoli, and then meatballs. And obviously you can make those vegan meatballs. We usually use chicken meatballs, but that kind of feels like a really good option. And who doesn't like macaroni and cheese, peas and meatballs together? It's every single time we make it, I'm like, this is delicious.
It sounds really good. We need to start doing that.
School lunch dinner.
Mm-hmm. Were there any things that you, as a kid, like any weird food aversions or quirks you had when you were little?
No, my I grew up liking everything, and I think that was a big part of that is because my family, it was like a rule that you had to at least try something. And it wasn't really allowed to not eat the same thing my parents are eating, or my family was eating. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, and so there wasn't like this is what the adults are eating, this is what the kids are eating kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. I remember, I don't know, even at Christmas parties, I would demolish the radishes on the vegetable tray or olives. All of that kind of stuff was really good to me as a kid. So fortunately, I was given a lot of opportunities to try new things, and it was never weird to try new things or like people weren't strange about it. I don't like raw onion. I guess that's the only thing.
I forgot. I just assume everyone else is on team raw onion and I'm the alone over here. Like, no, absolutely
I'm with
not.
you. I wish I did.
You are alone.
What about you growing up? Kind
of similar to you. Like, my mom is a really good cook, and I think she made a real effort to cook foods that she thought everyone would like, but at the same time, it wasn't like specifically kid foods. You know, we ate all kinds of stuff. And growing up, I loved vegetables. My grandparents on both sides of my family were farmers. And so we always had, they were always growing green beans or shelling beans or collard greens or mustard greens or like all these things that we would just incorporate into our meals all the time. So I loved that kind of stuff. My one quirky thing was that I used to just hate it when foods touched each other on my plate. So I would literally take a napkin and make a dam around stuff that was like really juicy because I could not stand the juice like flowing into anything else. And my grandmother would always be like, it's all going to the same place.
I need you to talk like that more often.
Yeah, I guess the only hang up that I ever developed as a kid was I think my mom like oversteamed some Brussels sprouts like one too many times to the point where they were, sulfury and soft. And yeah, for a while I wouldn't eat that. But, my father Ethan definitely got me back on the Brussels sprout train because he has this it's kind of like, I wouldn't say laborious, but it's not like it's harder than just putting them in an air fryer. But yeah, having the Brussels sprouts and then making kind of a garlic-infused olive oil situation before you put them in the pan, and then just get them nice and crispy and caramelized on that one cut side. Until that, couldn't handle Brussels sprouts until I had them out that way.
I mean, that's fair. I
Yeah.
feel like that's that they're not good when they're just steamed or boiled and they're all soft and like sulfury. Yeah.
Yeah. I had like a love-hate relationship with mussels for a little while, but I got over that. Love them.
I remember growing up, my mom also gardened, and a lot of kids don't like tomatoes, from what I hear, but like tomatoes were my favorite thing. And so I remember just sitting in the garden and eating all of the cherry tomatoes before she could bring them in for salads, and it being kind of an issue. She got pretty upset, but then, eating tomatoes isn't the worst thing.
Yeah.
I still remember the first time, like, a friend of mine brought a tomato and a salt shaker to school just to have with lunch one day, and I just couldn't believe this freak. Like, what are you doing? It's so good. I don't know. I mean, I don't do it very often,
was
but yeah,
ahead
just
of
a
his
nice salted
years.
tomato. He was.
I mean, yeah, we were chatting about this, like what are some kid-friendly vegan recipes? And like the first thing that came to mind for me was vegan chili, because I feel like it's such a good, comforting, like flavorful meal that most people like. And you can make a really good vegan version. We have one in Joy. I think it's called Megan's Vegan Chili.
Anything with Megan's name in front of it in the Joy you should make. Every single thing is great. You're
That's so
welcome.
nice.
Yeah, skip the rest of it.
But it uses, instead of like ground meat, it uses crumbled tempeh and also finely chopped mushrooms, which provide a really nice, that it gives you that texture that you would expect from a chili. And it also gives like some nice umami. So I feel like that's a really good food for kids.
I also like the chili idea because you can make it fun with like chips and other like fun
Exactly.
Yeah.
things. So it can be, everybody can kind of make it their own. And I think that's important too. So everybody has like a little bit of ownership on what they're eating, and that might help.
Yeah. Yeah, anything that you can tacoify
Yeah.
by adding lots of toppings
Or
or
just
just
put
choosing
it
your
In a
toppings.
bag of Fritos. What is that?
Yeah, totally. Walking taco.
Yes. That's fun.
Some crispy fried shallots might not be bad.
You want to
Those
put
are-
those on everything.
Yeah, true. It is kind of my go-to topping.
We were also thinking about like a good tomato soup, like a creamy tomato soup using coconut milk would be a really good fall and winter thing to do, and really easy.
And there are a lot of good vegan cheeses these days too. So you could even pair it with a classic grilled cheese,
Yeah.
vegan
Yeah, I
style.
feel like the Miyoko's, all of the Miyoko's cheeses are the ones I've tried are the best that
I
I've
like those
ever
too.
had. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's certainly much easier than, making your own vegan cheese sauce from scratch, which, I mean, I think Kenji Lopez Alt has a pretty good recipe for that kind of sauce, but it also takes a while. It's,
And that's more like a nacho cheese sauce, right? Or like queso than it is for something like grilled cheese.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was kind of just drawn toward, of course, burgers. I feel like those are pretty kid friendly. So yeah, we have a really good roasted mushroom burger that is a little bit of extra effort than a lot of other veggie burgers, but I think that it's worth it. It's very
And you
good.
can like make the patties and freeze them too. So yeah, you just make the full batch and then freeze the ones you don't eat right away, and then they'll be easy to reheat.
We were talking about like just pasta like with just like your basic red sauce. Maybe even using some like we have this like kind of I guess you could call it like a basic recipe for tempeh crumbles, just to add in situations where you would be using ground beef. But yeah, using that to create like a nice red sauce. And instead of I'm sure Miyoko's makes a pretty good Parmesan substitute, but yeah, like the toasted seasoned breadcrumbs that we usually make for certain types of pasta dishes. Those are it's a really good substitute for Parmesan.
Yeah.
You're just toasting the breadcrumbs in olive oil with garlic, and adding plenty of salt and herbs.
Yeah, they're delicious.
Yeah.
You make really This is going to sound ridiculous. You make really good breadcrumbs and croutons. You're like the crouton king.
I feel like I'm better at breadcrumbs. I feel like a lot of the time I just get a little carried away with the croutons, and they like could chip a tooth
But
off.
they're so good.
I think one time I showed up with croutons, and people were you could hear everybody just crunching on them. And ever since, I've just been like, okay, I'm sticking with breadcrumbs. That's it.
That's a healthy sound. It's a good crunch.
Yeah, it just tears up the roof of your mouth. No worries.
Oh, I was also thinking about, I'm just like on the soup soup train this week, but like a good miso ramen or like a shoyu ramen would be really good too. And you could top it with either like a baked tofu or even get some like vegan hot dogs and make those little octopus things
really
with the hot
cute.
dogs. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like noodles are always a good option. They're fun to eat. And again, I feel like making dishes that are customizable gives the kids a little bit of like, I don't know, that ownership is really important. It makes maybe them more excited to eat whatever it is they're putting on their plate because they get some choices.
Yeah, autonomy is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
It's like autonomy.
And maybe again, this might be like a little bit more effort than your average parent would want to put into dinner, but we have a recipe for gobi Manchurian, which is just fantastic. Think of it as, kind of like a General Tso's chicken, but instead of chicken, you're using cauliflower that's been battered and, it's been coated in a chickpea batter and then deep fried. And so it's just very satisfying, has a very kind of meaty appeal to it, I guess.
Yeah, that's really good. I love that dish, but I don't like making it because I don't like frying in my house. I don't know. Not my favorite. I know. John is like sighing.
I'm gonna make it tonight.
Okay. If you want to make it.
Coming over for dinner, just so you know.
You have my blessing.
We also don't fry things very often. Every so often we will, and then it smells like it for like a day and a half, and I can't stomach it. But I love fried food. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Food is great.
Ventilation is key.
Yeah.
I just fried some schnitzel last night, and
But that's like a shallow fry. That's a little bit. I feel like that's a little different.
I used like a quart of oil.
Oh, I didn't. Thank you for. I didn't even realize. I guess you cleaned it all up, which is awesome. So thank you.
I did do that. It's one of the things I do.
Dishes.
I'm famously a dish avoider. So. Oh yeah, and we had a few ideas for like sweet treats too. There is a recipe for roasted banana coconut popsicles in Joy. They're so good. I think it has like brown sugar and you roast the bananas and then there's coconut milk. It's a very solid popsicle. And then, I mean, literally and figuratively. And then also there's like there's a cookie recipe. I think it's like a 3-ingredient or 4-ingredient peanut butter cookie, but you can make, I think ours has an egg in it, but you can make a version of it with just peanut butter, sugar, or maple syrup and flour. Like they're really simple. A kid could definitely make them. And they're really good. They just taste like a peanut butter cookie.
Yeah, and then there's also we have 2 sorbet recipes that are great. A chocolate sorbet and I mean, I guess the molasses one is more of an ice cream.
Yeah, that molasses, I mean, it sounds a little funky, but molasses ice cream, it's something that I learned when I was working in fine dining. It's a vegan ice cream and it's just coconut milk and molasses. Literally, that's it. And you churn it, but it has it's so creamy and it's perfectly sweet and it's got a little bit of that molasses, like it's not just a sugar sweetness. It's got the complexity of the molasses, and it's like a tiny bit of bitterness, but it's just enough to make it interesting.
Yeah.
It's so good. Yeah, I haven't made that in forever.
That sounds really, really good.
Yeah, and couldn't be easier.
And for like a party, special occasion or whatever, we do have a vegan chocolate cake with vegan chocolate frosting recipe in the book. So
is that the tofu, like the silken tofu frosting?
Yes.
You're looking at me. I don't know.
He's like, let me think back on the hundreds and hundreds of recipes.
Yes, it uses the silken tofu for it.
Nice.
Silken tofu, though, I have seen people use for desserts pretty often these days, too. I really like the texture of silken tofu.
Me too. It's so good.
And
yeah.
you can use it for, I don't know, I just feel like you can use it in so many ways to make it fun. In soups, miso soup, that sort of thing. But I don't remember who it was, but somebody was talking about how they use it for a dessert. And you can really put anything on it.
Yeah, and I think you can use it. I mean, we do have that. There's a vegan chocolate pudding recipe in Joy that is just that. It's silken tofu blended with melted chocolate, and it's very simple, very delicious in my opinion. But yeah, I think you can do a lot of variations of that, or just serve it with some really good like roasted fruit and
a little
like, maple
honey
syrup or honey.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's not vegan, but yeah,
really good texture, like a pudding.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a topic, ingredient, or joy story to share, call our hotline at 503-395-8858. Leave us a message or send us a text. We would love to hear from you.
Next week's topic comes from our caller.
This was an anonymous text, and the question is, can you leave kraut out for too long? I made a batch that was sitting on my bookshelf, and then on day 4, I left for a trip forgetting to put the kraut in the fridge. By the time I returned, it was day 9. The kraut was extra fizzy and a little on the mushy side. Is it okay to eat it?
It's a very relatable question. I feel like that's happened to me. So normally on the podcast, we have a guest each week, but this week we do not have a guest. So we're going to talk through something we haven't really explicitly done so much on the podcast yet, which is talk about the different editions of Joy of Cooking, kind of a brief overview of the history, because we could really dig in deep on the history.
Was my eye roll like audible?
Yeah, we're just going to quickly discuss the almost 100-year history of Joy of Cooking. I think in future episodes we'll like pick one edition and talk more extensively, but it would be helpful, I think, to give an overview, because I do find that people don't know the history, or they have their copy and that's what they know.
Or invariably, we get approached just like, oh, I have the first edition. My mother handed it down to me, and it's like, oh yeah, that's the one from 1975.
Yeah. Like, do you have a first edition? Because that would be amazing. No one has those. But yeah, I mean, speak of the first edition, published in 1931 by John's great-grandmother, Irma Rombauer. John, could you talk a little bit about the circumstances leading up to her publishing that edition? And we'll talk about kind of what makes it unique and why it sort of, to me, it's such an unlikely story that someone like Irma would publish a cookbook in that era and have it be so successful for so long.
So, Irma was, upper middle class homemaker. Her 2 children, Marion and Edgar, had moved out. Edgar had moved to Seattle. Marion was, I think, in Cincinnati at that point. And her husband, Edgar Sr., died by suicide. And so he left, perhaps a year's worth of money to live on. And so without any professional skills to kind of fall back on, Irma decided to take half of her life savings and self-publish a cookbook, which, I think you alluded to how, just kind of miraculous it is. And she was not a trained cook. She wasn't even particularly well known for her prowess in the kitchen. It was just kind of a shot in the dark. She collected a bunch of recipes from friends, acquaintances. She was, I guess, what you would call a luncheon club lady kind of type.
She was really involved in her community, like in St. Louis at the time. And I mean, still to some degree, there was a huge German population. And so she was very active in the local German immigrant population. But also she was very, she had, like you mentioned, luncheon clubs where they would talk about art and music, and they would have musicians come and speak at their club or their coffee klatch.
And what years was this exactly?
Right around 1930.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, she was much more of an entertainer than she was a proficient home cook. I mean, I think she cooked because she had to, but she was much more interested in let me finish this really quick so I can get back out and enjoy the party. That's the sense I get from her early like cookbooks kind of reflect that too, because there's so many like canapé ideas and little like finger foods that you would serve at a party. And there was like a whole, I don't think I'm getting too far ahead of ourselves, but there is this chapter called Brunch, Lunch, and Supper Dishes, which is kind of a mystery chapter because we just don't.
Yeah, it's a grab bag. Well, I feel like it's things that she made like, on a weekly basis, but also anything that she knew of that had like, any kind of shortcut involved.
Mm-hmm.
Things that were easy to whip up. And yeah, like you said, just get in and out of the kitchen as quickly as possible. In the 1931 edition, there wasn't so much a reliance on canned goods and whatnot. That came a little bit later. But yeah, it's been there since the beginning, that kind of emphasis on convenience, I guess, especially for Irma's editions.
I have to say the cover of the first one is so good.
It's amazing.
Do we know what the history is on that cover?
Yeah. So Irma's daughter, Marion, actually did the illustration. It's a paper cut. So she would use like an X-Acto knife to cut out the paper. It's Saint Martha of Bethany. So on the cover, it looks like a woman in a long blue dress, and she's holding a broom in one hand that's like over her head, and then a handbag in the other. And there's a dragon-looking creature kind of behind her. And that is this the story of the Tarasque. It's called a Tarasque. It's a medieval French sea monster.
I love it.
It's like part turtle, part dragon or something. It's yeah. If you Google Tarasque, a lot of the artist representations of it are pretty funny to look at.
But it's Saint Martha of Bethany, who is the patron saint of cooks, and she is the idea is that she is about to slay the dragon of kitchen drudgery. So it's a very fun.
It's just awesome.
The cover is very early 1930s. Like the font on the cover is. Do you remember the name of the font? It's like a very particular.
Yeah, it's called Bifur, Bifur. Yeah, it's almost illegible. I mean,
it's really, not the best for reading, but
it's
looks
really cool to look at. Yeah, hard to describe. Very geometric, but like the negative space has solid colors. So yeah,
we can put this in the show notes too,
exactly,
so people can look at it because it's hard to envision. But it's really kind of epic. And her Marion's illustrations are throughout in each chapter heading. She did an illustration for, and I remember reading that she wasn't very good at drawing. She loved art. Marion was, she and her husband collected art and they loved artists, but she wasn't very good at drawing, but she was really good at cutting paper, which is so awesome. And we tried to carry that through into the 2019 edition by bringing in an artist who we're going to have on the show, I think, in a couple weeks or maybe even next week. Her name is Anna Brones, and she does paper cuts. So we have like new paper cut illustrations for every chapter in the 2019 edition to kind of call back to what Marion was doing in those early editions.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah, so that first edition had about 1,200 recipes, give or take, and was a svelte 400 pages. Just like a very slim volume, especially when compared to what happened. I mean, even in the very next edition in 1936, that was the first one that was actually picked up by a publisher, a Midwestern publisher named Bob's Merrill that is no more. But I think it was like the last major Midwestern publisher to survive. And that one added like over 1,000 recipes. So yeah. And then also for that edition, Irma, in between the 1931 edition and 1936 edition, she created this way of writing recipes. She never called it this, but it has been referred to as the action method, where the instructions and the ingredients are kind of listed together. So the ingredients they actually just appear in the recipe where they are needed, as opposed to having a list up front. Making grocery lists is like a little bit more difficult, but she would bold the ingredients in the recipe, so it's pretty easy to single them out when you're making a list.
And that is like one of the things that I think makes Joy of Cooking extremely, like, really unique is the recipe style, the way the recipes are written. And I think for a lot of people, if they've never used it before and they open Joy, they're like, how do I read this recipe? It requires a little bit of just allowing your brain to be flexible and going with the flow. But I personally love this format for a couple of reasons.
I mean, I feel like you don't have to be as flexible of a reader like when you're going through one of these recipes, except for the shopping phase. Like when you're actually cooking, you don't have to go back and forth between ingredient amounts and the instructions, and so it's actually much easier to follow. But
yeah, I agree.
But it does like defy people's expectations when they're used to having the ingredient list first.
I think I also like it as a recipe developer because one of the things you run into, even when you're, an experienced recipe developer, is that when you're writing something and all the ingredients are at the top and then you have your instructions below, often you might be calling for the same ingredient twice in a recipe. Like you need 2 tablespoons of butter up here, but then you're going to need more down in step 4. It's really easy to forget to say only add 2 tablespoons here, and then you have to say divided in the ingredient line. Well, the action method eliminates the need to do that. And so it makes it harder as a recipe developer to make as many mistakes because you can't forget. It's got to be right there in the ingredient line. So I like it because it keeps me honest, but it's also just more a narrative. So you can really read the recipe almost like a story about what you need to do at what time. And you don't have to do that thing where you're constantly going back and forth and getting discombobulated.
And yeah, if an ingredient is called for in 2 different spots in a recipe, instead of doing the arithmetic when you're in the kitchen and trying to juggle ingredients and referring to the recipe and then going back to your prep, you're not having to do the arithmetic then. You're doing the arithmetic like when you're making your list. So yeah, there's some trade-offs, but we appreciate the pros
No,
more than the cons.
I'm a really big fan. And I think it's also just so interesting to me that Irma developed this completely new way of writing recipes when she was in her like mid 50s and was not a terribly accomplished cook. But she saw, like, to my thinking, she saw a problem and she was like, why are recipes written this way? I'm going to fix it.
Yeah.
And she just came up with it. And I don't know. I find that to be that's really cool, I think.
I feel like she just seems brave in a lot of ways. Like coming up with a new recipe system, publishing a book like this, like it's just all very brave.
Yeah.
For sure. I have no idea how she did it, but yeah, so the 1936 edition, first one published by a major publisher, and also pretty much the first time that Irma tried to compete with like the big quote unquote Bible cookbooks. So it was the first real attempt to make Joy of Cooking like a comprehensive book.
And other books at the time would have been like Fannie Farmer, Boston Cooking School.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The differentiating factors between Joy and those other cooking Bibles, like one-stop shop cookbooks, is just that it was much more personable. She was not writing it from a home economist's standpoint. It was more of a fellow cook, somebody that didn't have any formal training.
The first edition of Joy had a subtitle. Do you remember the subtitle?
Yes. A compilation of reliable recipes with a casual culinary chat.
Which I think that the casual culinary chat part was what was so different and what people really latched onto was because you might be in your kitchen making dinner for your family, and then you're reading a silly head note that Irma left, or like a joke or an anecdote or something, and kind of bringing joy into that moment when you might be stressed or unsure about what you're doing or just in a rush, and kind of like calling you back to the moment and to like experience what you're doing. I think that's a big part of why people loved the book, because it wasn't so dry. It wasn't just this manual of how to do something. It was like, let me help you feel something too.
She was not afraid to express opinions. She wasn't always trying to sell recipes. I mean, sometimes she would definitely single them out as like like something that was like a favorite of hers, especially like that, the Rombauer special, like this chocolate cake with like this boiled white icing. That was definitely something that she was always like it's like, this is the best thing ever. But on the other side of it, she'll just have like these kind of snarky like head notes where it's just like, I have been told that people like this.
Yeah, she definitely included recipes that she didn't care for, but that she had heard or that people had requested that she put in the book. So I feel like she did that too with was it the sweet potato casserole and the marshmallows where she was
Yeah.
basically like
Yeah.
down on
She was a
marshmallows?
hater. She was a hater, yeah. Wasn't really aware of that until a fellow from Washington Post was asking for like a Thanksgiving special, like if I could dredge up some good history from old Joy of Cooking editions, and I thought it was pretty funny. I mean, I'm fine with the quote unquote sweet potato treatment, but I definitely veer savory.
It's a divisive. I
I'm-
feel like it's a divisive subject.
I'm with Irma on that
Yeah.
one. Sorry. I know you're a marshmallow fan, John. Sorry.
Jeez, you outed me. So Irma published 2 more editions in her lifetime. There was the 1943 edition, which added a bunch of recipes to that brunch, lunch, and supper chapter that included canned goods, because there was a book in between those editions called Streamlined Cooking that was just purely focused on using convenience goods. It was like
a book that Irma wrote.
that
called
Irma,
Streamlined.
yes,
Yeah.
right. Not officially part of the Joy of Cooking canon, but nonetheless, a lot of that book actually got folded into the 1943 edition. The 1943 edition also had a bunch of rationing information because World War II was happening at the time, including like entire chapters on like how to, like there was like a sugar savers chapter because sugar was being rationed, as well as like a whole chapter that's just entitled Meat Stretching, Meat Substitutes, and Supplementary Dishes. But just a whole bunch of suggestions on like, high protein substitutes for meat, and including like a recipe for soybean loaf and soybean dinner in one dish.
Oh, I want to know more
Soybean
about that.
salad. Peanuts as a meat substitute. So yeah, just a bunch of interesting topical information there during a very tumultuous time in our history.
Yeah, it's really cool to look at that edition just for that supplemental material. And that was the only difference between that and the 1946 edition was that
Right.
in 46 they took out the rationing information, everything.
Yeah. I mean, we basically count those as one edition just because, I mean, it's
the same book. It's just minus
Yeah.
some stuff.
they had to add some more material to avoid repaginating, basically. So yeah, her last edition, the 1951 edition, notable for a few reasons. First edition that Marion really contributed anything besides the paper cuts to. The baking chapters, in particular, have Marion's kind of fingerprints all over them. There's like this very systematic and scientifically informed discussion of grains and like flours at the very beginning of the baking chapters.
Yeah, I think this edition is where you start to see the kind of binary between Irma and Marion, because Irma was a very fly by the seat of your pants kind of cook, and she just kind of did what she liked. And there wasn't a lot of method to the madness. And Marion was much more methodical. And so she would exhaustively research something and then write like a primer on how to do it, like yeast breads. She was really into baking bread. And so she talked about, how yeast works. She wanted to talk about the structure of a grain, like a wheat grain, like the germ and the bran and the endosperm, and there's like a diagram. So yeah, she was much more of a researcher and wanted to get things really right. She was also kind of a completist. Like she wanted Joy of Cooking to teach everything that you would need to know to cook.
Yeah, and as a result, that was the first edition to crack 1,000 pages and included about 4,000 recipes. So definitely
A little bit different.
Yeah, no, like Joy of Cooking for those first editions is like kind of a balloon that was getting overinflated. And I think it's the last edition where nothing had been cut. So like it was an accumulation of like all of the recipes that Irma was like really enthused by. And then of course some of the stuff from Marianne for the baking chapters. But yeah, as a consequence, it's like has the largest number of stuffed vegetable recipes. So the 1963 edition is Marianne's first solo edition, and it really is like a really big break in Joy's publication history. a lot of recipes were cut to make room for new and exciting things. Like, she was definitely adding a lot of continental recipes, especially French recipes, as well as just like more international foods, period. And, Marianne's very attuned to health food. And so as a result, there was like recipes for soy milk, recipe for tofu.
There are also kind of surprising number, like in the baking chapters, there are recipes for wheat-free baked goods.
Right.
In the 63 version.
Yeah, in
Wow.
the 60s. I know she was influenced a lot by some of the food movements that were going on at the time. Like, it's pretty clear that she read Diet for a Small Planet because she starts the meat chapter with, like, we should probably be eating less meat, as a society. So it's really interesting to see, like, what she was influenced by. And we've gotten a sense of that, too, from just we've inherited some of her cookbook collection. So it's interesting to note like what cookbooks she would have been looking at as she was researching for this edition.
Yeah, and in addition to those kinds of recipe choices that she was making, and the cuts that she was making to all of those wonderful stuffed vegetable dishes at Irma, there was also a ton of reference information that was added. I think one of her other ambitions for Joy of Cooking, for this new Joy of Cooking that she was creating, was to have it be kind of the American version of the Larousse Gastronomique, the French cooking encyclopedia. I mean, I'm glad that she did not go alphabetical with it, like the Larousse, because I feel like that's just not very helpful.
Right.
But yeah, so whole sections on like cooking techniques, whole chapter on ingredients. I don't think it was called Know Your Ingredients. I think it was called The Foods We Eat. It wasn't called Know Your Ingredients until the next edition, 1975. Marianne's Last. Our best-selling edition. A lot of incremental improvements on the 63. The illustrations had changed. Like the 63 edition and the 50s and the 60s had these like Jetsons hands illustrations. That's what we call them.
So good. They're honestly the best. I love the illustrations. They're so mid-century where like it's just like a very delicate woman's hands in a lot of them, and her hands are really tiny and the food looks really big, but they're beautiful. I have fantasized about getting many of them tattooed because they're just so sweet. But then, in the 70s, an artist named Ikki Matsumoto redid all the illustrations. He was a student of Charlie Harper, right?
Right.
Yeah. So he did all the illustrations for the 75, and it's more like a cross-hatching style.
Yeah, cross-hatching style, and just like more. I don't know. It's hard to say photorealistic, but I mean, they're definitely like less stylized and more of an attempt to be accurate, especially with like the process illustrations. But yeah, really, really cool in their own right.
And that was the gold cover. That's when the gold was introduced, was 75?
Right, the
or-
gold,
Yes.
the gold
Yeah.
lettering, right?
Yeah.
I feel like it's very iconic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, that is the best-selling edition. So that is the one, that's often the one that people have when they're like, oh, I have the original Joy of Cooking. It'll be the 70s edition because there were so many copies printed of that one. And then there wasn't another edition until 1997.
Yeah, a 22-year gap.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Marian passed away in 1977, and my father Ethan, kind of became the steward / co-author of the book. But there was just like a lot of turmoil in the publishing industry as well, at least with our publisher. So Bob's Merrill was bought by a big conglomerate, ITT. It's hard to explain like why they were in a position to quote unquote sell us off, but we were kind of moved over to Macmillan. And this whole time, Marian especially had earned the respect of the publisher and of her editors, but Ethan was kind of an unknown quantity, and I feel like there were many attempts made to kind of wrestle editorial control away from the family, away from Ethan, and Ethan was not going to go along with that.
And some frankly dirty dealings, in my opinion.
Yeah,
We'll save that for another episode, but there were some really underhanded things that went on to try to get the Joy of Cooking away from the family, including like they kind of spied on your dad, like low-key spied on him to figure out if he was capable of doing an edition. He didn't know they were there for that purpose. It's a wild story, but they did get eventually the 1997 edition published with Scribner.
Right.
After a long arduous battle, that's why it took so long between editions, because there was just a lot of shenanigans. But yeah, it is like the most controversial Joy edition, because if you look at them all together, and if you were a Joy of Cooking fan before that came out and you picked it up, you might be shocked at how different it was. The recipe style was all the same. There were new illustrations, but they were very, in keeping with.
Yeah, they were not pointillist. What is it?
No, that's right.
Yeah, pointillist.
Yeah.
Even more photorealistic than the line drawings or the cross hatching.
Yeah.
That Iki Matsumoto was doing. Yeah, actually, the illustrations are really good for the 1997 edition.
What made it controversial?
A lot of things got cut.
Okay.
It had been 22 years, and by the time that they were, revising the book, I guess it had only been 20 years, but a long time. And a lot of the material they just felt was like outdated or unnecessary, like, people are cooking differently, et cetera, et cetera. And
so whole chapters were cut.
Whole chapters were cut because like the manuscript just ballooned to like an insane size. Yeah. So the preserving chapters were cut, pickling and jams and jellies, canning.
Cocktails
were cut, which I guess, in the mid-90s, cocktails, it was a sad period in cocktail making history.
What are you talking about? Cosmopolitans. I think. I don't know.
I'm
Appletini.
I'm not trying to yuck any yums. Just saying, like, there was not, the cocktail renaissance revival or whatever you want to call it had not happened yet. So maybe that was a savvy choice. I don't know. But it had definitely been the first time we hadn't had a cocktail recipe since, like, forever.
Since ever.
I mean, Irma was publishing, she published cocktail recipes like during Prohibition.
Yeah.
So.
It makes me love her even more.
I know. So relatable.
So after the 1997 edition was published, after the controversy was registered by Ethan and the family, then we kind of tried to get back to the magic that the 1975 edition had, and we kind of we picked and chose what the 1997 edition did offer that was new and useful and delicious, and then try to just bring back like more of the reference information and all those chapters that went missing. And then, the 2019 edition, best of them all.
It is. It's definitely
The end.
best. You guys did a great job with it.
Thanks.
It's a beautiful book. Great recipes, also great technical information as well.
Thanks. Well, yeah, we worked really hard on it. We added 600 new recipes, tested all of the older recipes, updated what we needed to, did a lot of research on techniques and ingredients, 'cause there are a lot of things that, it's kind of wild how much cooking and food, you don't think it's something that would change that much, but it really does. Like the way we think about food, the ingredients we have ready access to, is always changing. So there were a lot of things that we needed to add or just update because things were more in reach for most cooks. And so we tried to take the tactic that Marion did as she was updating, which is always looking at it with fresh eyes, not being too precious about old stuff that people aren't really going to use. Like if someone wants an old Joy of Cooking recipe, there are old editions that they can have. Like we want the new Joy to be very useful. We don't want it to be a museum piece. And so that was kind of our guiding light, was thinking about what is truly useful. How can we make this book even more comprehensive for modern cooks? That's what we're going to do with the next edition too.
Exciting. Great timing. I have guests coming into town, and I'm always feeling like I'm struggling with making sure I have things that other people will want in my kitchen. We're not very big snackers, for example, but I know some people are. We don't have different kinds of milks, all of that kind of thing. So do you have suggestions for easy ways to prep for guests to visit and ensure you have things in the kitchen that they might want?
Well, it sounds like you have a pretty good handle on what your guests' preferences are.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, mostly. You never know what people are actually eating in their own kitchen.
Sure. Well, I don't know. I mean, when my father's visiting, he has very particular needs, and I have gone out of my way to like, he wants to have orange juice with every breakfast. He drinks a lot, like too much orange juice. He thinks it's like helps him with his acid reflux, which
Really?
I mean, if it works for him, fine. But yeah, sometimes I've gone out of my way to prepare, to like go to the store and stock up on these things that I think he will like. But more often than not, he actually kind of wants to go to the grocery store when he comes anyways. So I don't
He
know.
likes to
I
go
don't know
with
how-
us to the store. I will say, like, so my sister, when we first moved to Portland, like over 10 years ago, my sister came to visit us and stayed with us at our first little apartment. And apparently, she did not tell me this at the time, but years later, she said she had to text my other sister and was like, they don't have any food here. Which is hilarious because we have so much food.
Yeah.
But what she meant was that we didn't have any like snacks.
Ready to eat.
It was
food.
all stuff you had to prepare in some way. And so ever since she told me that, I feel like I've gone in the opposite direction and just will go to Trader Joe's and get, you got to get nuts, you got to get fruit, you got to get potato chips, you got to get, just stuff people can grab, or like stuff that you can use to make a really quick like cheese plate or something, just
Sandwiches.
snacking. Yeah,
Yeah.
sandwiches, exactly.
Yeah, I feel like you have to have breakfast figured out. And,
Yeah.
And you have to have, you don't have to, but it would be good to have some meal planning going on like before they get there. Just a vague idea of how many meals, how many dinners you guys are going to have out, how many are going to be in. And yeah, having all the breakfast stuff.
And buy more coffee than you think.
Always
you're
more
gonna
coffee.
need. Yeah.
Yeah, and we need to remember that because I'm a 1 cup a day girl, so we need more coffee in the house.
Which probably means that like you don't use like a standard coffee maker.
We just use a little French press, and
Yeah. Hate to say this, but it might be a good idea to like,
I know.
yeah. I actually have some. I mean, if you go for something like an economical choice when it comes to like the standard coffee maker, I do have some advice after like staying at other people's places, and also like we actually just purchased a coffee maker because we do pour overs, and it just
So
gets
it's not practical
tiring.
for multiple people.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Send me links.
Well, yeah. If you unplug the coffee maker, like, or just turn it off, like right after it gets the grounds wet enough. Just take a moment, open it up, stir the grounds, let it bloom, and then turn it on again. And then when there's enough water in the basket so that it's all kind of just a slurry, then give it a good stir. And believe it or not, that like makes a huge difference with just regular old coffee makers.
That's a really good idea.
Good coffee hack from John.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Joy of Cooking podcast. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts and iTunes. Follow us on Instagram at The Joy of Cooking. Stay tuned for next week, where we will tackle fermentation. Call in with questions, hopes, history, or where you find joy in the kitchen. Our number is 503-395-8858. That's 503-395-8858.
And of course, we could not do this without our fantastic team at the Joy of Creation production house. Thank you to Kayleen Veach, our production coordinator, Haley Bowers, our audio engineer, and Sarah Marshall, our producer.